Today we're analyzing Lauren de Graaf, who is a tall, very tall, apparently 5'11" Dutch model. However, they may lie about that. Without further ado, we're going to hop right into the front profile. So her front profile, to start it off with my harmony formula, got an 88% total score, which is a fantastic score for the front profile. That's really high. For reference, another face that scored really high similarly is Gio Scotti at about 90%. So absolutely a very high score and what you expect for a front profile out of a top model. I mean, really, it kind of exceeds what you expect, but it's within that range of top model harmony. And starting it off, she actually has a flaw with her eyes. Let me readjust my chair. So her eye spacing is actually a bit close set, with her eye separation ratio being 44%. And as many of you know, you want it more in that 45% range at minimum for women, but ideally you want it to be about 46%. So her total eye spacing is a bit close set at about 44%. However, it's redeemed a bit with her eyes being exactly one eye apart, which kind of counteracts that farce or that close set appearance. Like, for example, if her eyes were more like this distance apart, it would look a lot more close set, but her eyes are one eye spacing apart, which really helps that. And I think the main reason that she has a low eye separation ratio is because her total facial width is just very high. So I think when you use the ratios in conjunction, her eye spacing still looks pretty good generally. Like, it doesn't scream close set to me at all. However, you guys may disagree, let me know in the comments, but I think her eye spacing still looks pretty good. And 44% is not a huge flaw, just a moderate flaw. Next, we'll look at her thirds. So her thirds are, I'm not going to draw it out specifically because it's just a general idea. Her upper third is the tallest, and it's taller than her middle and her lower. And yeah, her thirds are well proportioned. They're all pretty close to a third with a bigger forehead, which is neotenous and ideal. And next we will look at her canthal tilt, which is one of her strongest features in my opinion. Like, when I saw her, I was like, oh wow, her tilt's really good, with a canthal tilt on average of 8.8 degrees positive. So that is a great feature. In women, really, you can have really high tilt, and something in conjunction with her great tilt is a feature that's very important, which is a straight lower eyelid, which is visible in both men and women. Like Sean O'Pry, Elias Put have pretty straight lower lid, which is where the lower eyelid doesn't go below the medial canthus too much at all. And I think, I have to go here, and I can do a quick morph to show you guys, if you adjust her tilt more negative, this lower lid becomes below the medial canthus, if you can see, and that gives a far worse appearance. I think the lower lid contour is really more responsible for how the tilt looks rather than the actual canthal tilt, if that makes sense. It's an unbased theory, but something I've noticed. Regardless though, her tilt is great. Next we'll look at her facial width height ratio, which, this is a good one to show it, is about 2, which again, a trait that you often see in these top faces. Very compact mid faces, normally short noses, so that this is also compact as far as thirds. Wide and compact faces, so yeah, 2-to-1, great feature. We can look at her frontal jaw angle, which it varied throughout the pictures, but it's about 95 degrees typically, which is towards the upper ideal range of about 98, but still showcases an ideal inclination of her jaw, as well as the fact that her jaw is very lean. Like, you can see it's extremely lean. I don't know if I want to say extremely, but I mean, it kind of is. It's very lean and prominent. So overall, very good jaw. Something that she clearly has is extremely high set cheekbones, especially with really good contour. I mean, you can see these cheekbones are very high set. Her cheekbones are nearly at her eyes, I won't get into specific measurement, but she classifiably has very high set cheekbones, which is another great feature. I mean, really, you're seeing the trend. Her front profile is really good. We will get into a flaw. Her bigonial width is a little bit narrow. So what's a good photo for this? Let's just use this one. Her bigonial width is about 80% of her cheekbone width, and ideally it would be like 82 at the minimum. So her jaw could be a little bit wider, though again, this is a super minor flaw. She still has a feminine jaw. I mean, it's hyper feminine if anything, and it's still dimorphic, so that's a very small flaw. What else is interesting to cover? So her eyebrows are a little bit on the higher set end, which is dimorphic, yet technically a flaw, if that makes sense. Like, they could be a little bit lower above to her eyes. So her eyebrows are about medium set, and you do want higher set brows in women, but you do want them a little bit lower than her eyebrows. But again, this is super minor. They still are in a very, like, within a very good range of setness. It's not like they're super high set or something. They are just on the higher set end of things. But overall, I mean, her eye area as a whole, if you factor in everything, is still extremely feminine. Any other flaws in the front? Yeah, there is. This is kind of like her biggest flaw, yet it's like not a super important thing. But her lower third proportion, which is this line divided by this line, is about 35%, indicating that her philtrum is on a little bit of the longer end and that her mouth is low on her lower third. If that makes sense. So like her mouth line could be more up here, but it's down here. Again, I mean, so it's such nitpicking, right? She still has a very harmonious face. A nice feature she has is that her jaw inclination, this angle right here, jaw frontal angle, it harmonizes very well with her ipsilateral alar angle, which is this right here, nearly perfectly, which is a trait you see in a lot of high fashion faces and just very attractive faces. It just adds to the balance and proportion of her face. We'll cover her eye aspect ratio, which is 2.7 to 1. Wait, I just botched that. And this is a great ratio. I mean, the absolute perfect is 2.8 to 1 in women, but it shows that her eyes are neither too rounded nor too like horizontally elongated. Like, someone like Zendaya comes to mind as someone that has eyes that are a little bit too horizontally elongated, not really feminine enough. But Lauren's eyes are, these are an absolute perfect shape. And for men, you know, you do want super elongated, like Jordan Barrett or Sean O'Brien, with that a ratio of like 3.6 to 1 is pretty ideal. But in her case, it's perfect. Her mouth width to nose width ratio is good, but it could be better. You can kind of see her mouth is a little bit narrow. Ideally, you want the mouth width, especially in women, to intersect with both irises, and then you want the nose width to barely intersect with the canthus. So her nose width is good, but her mouth width could be a little bit wider. Super small flaw. Other than that, I mean, her front is just harmonious, you know. She just doesn't really have many flaws at all. That's about it. Her total face shape is pretty good, at generally being about 1.32 times taller than wide. You know, I take a reference from a lot of photos because distortion. So ideally, you want it in that 1.29 to 1.33 in women, and hers falls in that range. Very pleasant face shape. I think her general facial proportions, and especially her kind of outlining bone structure, is really good, as well as her midface is good too. But her face is proportioned really well. She has a good total face shape, good facial width height ratio, etc. So yeah, overall, an 88% harmony front profile, which is fantastic. Okay, so jumping straight into the side profile, this is where Lauren's issues kind of shine. Though it's not terrible, but it is notable. So first off the bat, like phenotypically, her side profile kind of reminds me of Adriana Lima, where her chin meets her nasion and brow ridge, but then it's kind of like a triangle. It's like this. You just have a very convex profile overall. So her main issue on this side is her facial convexity in all forms, which this angle right here assesses the flatness or roundedness of the side profile. And her facial convexity is 161 degrees, which ideally you want it more at that 166 at the lowest. So her face is a little bit too round. And other facial convexity measurements show the same thing, that her face is just too rounded. So we can go into liquify and change this a little bit. I mean, I've not tried this before, so this could look really bad, but just try to give it as natural of a shape as possible. I mean, that it does look a little bit weird, but I mean, bear with me. I think you get the premise at least. Kind of hard to not make the shape just look like it's jutting out, because like there's not much to really work with, if that makes sense. But I think this looks more like Margot Robbie's side profile, you know, and then this is like, you can definitely see it looks a bit recessed relative to her face. And I mean, I would leave the brow alone though, but yeah. So that's her main side profile flaw, but I mean, for a woman, that isn't even the worst flaw ever. There's a lot of women that are pretty highly rated that have a very similar profile to this. She has a lot of great features too. I mean, her lip assessments are actually still pretty solid. This is good. This is good. This is okay. Could be a little better. Her E-plane, this is really bad. So you want some distance between the tip of the nose to the chin. You want some distance from the lips in this line, and her lips are touching this line. So that's an issue with her lip assessments, which again is showing that her chin should be more projected, like out here. We can actually find kind of exactly where it should be. It should be like here. I mean, it's some millimeters, and this would be ideal. I mean, she has a good gonal angle. Like, her jaw pretty much checks out. She has a good gonal angle of about 122 degrees, which is good. Her ramus is ideally long relative to her mandible, and her mandibular plane is about 22 degrees, which shows that she's not too downgrown nor too flat as far as her like plane of her jaw, which is good. She also marks some general facial things, like her nasofrontal angle is good and feminized at 133 degrees, which is good. That she definitely has a very feminized forehead and glabella and nasion region. It's very feminized. Her brow ridge inclination is 22 degrees, which is ideal. It's very feminized. She does have a negative orbital vector, which shows in the front profile. You can see that she kind of lacks some under eye support here, and her lower lid is entirely exposed, which is from a negative orbital vector, which I think you can kind of see here. Just some lack of support underneath the eyes. Again, just really not a very important thing, but it's worth noting. It does, things do add up, but it's not like a huge flaw within itself. Things like her nasolabial angle is good. Like, she does have a lot of ideal things, which this angle right here is 113 degrees, which is ideal. Feminized. Yeah, really, her nose assessments are actually good. Her nose is ideally projected, and it's ideally tall, though her dorsal hump or her dorsal shape could be a bit better. It could be more ski slope, which we can also show that. Hopefully I can show it. I don't really want to like recess it though. So like, I'm like adding more kind of. You can see the difference. I mean, I didn't do it perfectly, but you get the gist of things. Like if it was done perfectly, it would look like notably better. So overall, her side profile still does like check most landmarks. So it's still above average at 77%. But with the side profile, I find about, in my formula, 70% is about average. So it's still an above average side profile like compared to the population. But it's definitely below what you would expect like based on her front profile, if that makes sense. And so yeah, now let's generate an overall like beauty score for Lauren de Graaf. So her total harmony overall is 8.4 out of 10, which is pretty good. That's pretty high. I mean, that's really high, really. I don't know many people. I don't know many like actors that aren't top actors that get that high. It's definitely a model tier. And we'll look at her facial angularity. So her facial angularity is her jaw and cheekbones are very defined the entire way through. Really defined. It's really good angularity. You can see that her cheeks have some leanness, have some contour, some protrusion here. Very lean. You can see it here as well. Really lean, good contour. I mean, this is nearly perfect facial angularity in a woman. Like, you don't really need like the hollow cheeks. So I'd give her about a 9 in facial angularity. So harmony 8.4, angularity 9. Her dimorphism, now I gave her a 7.5. I've already thought about her dimorphism. So her jaw is pretty dimorphic. So I gave her jaw a 7.5 out of 10 in dimorphism. And I kind of make an overall score. But it is a little bit too wide, so I did deduct. Her eye area as a whole, I gave her a 9 in dimorphism. It's really good. I did deduct a point for the eye separation ratio though, but still overall it's definitely a 9. And then her nose I gave a 5 because the dorsal hump from the side profile, and there's a little bit too much nostril show from the front, so I gave it a 5. So overall her dimorphism I gave a 7.5, which is still pretty good. And then for her miscellaneous features, like things like skin quality, those type of things, I gave an 8. And I deducted again for the nose shape, the flared ears, which this one, it's asymmetrical as well. This one's pretty notably like flared out. And for the under eye support and the lower lid. So I gave her an 8 in miscellaneous features. So her overall score is about an 8 to 8.25 in my opinion. An 8 to 8.25, pretty high scoring. Definitely a very attractive face. You know, it's a range, right? You can't perfectly calculate attractiveness like to that extent. It's just a general range. You could even argue she's a 7.5, or you could argue she's an 8.5. There's more range, but her overall exact score is an 8.25, but I would say the range is about 8 to 8.25 is pretty fair for her. But again, you know, you just want to kind of classify like what range. She's definitely in the 1 in thousands of people range, I would say. She's in about probably 1 in 5,000 people. 100% into the 1 in thousands, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my rating on Lauren de Graaf. I apologize for the lack of videos lately, guys. If you want to purchase your own analysis, as always, first link in the description. And FaceIQ has a lot of great videos coming out soon, guys. So I appreciate it, and see you guys next time.